Hey guys, I think I'm live. And, oh, yes, here I am. Hey, it's Alexis from Not Safe for Mom group, doing my first live by myself. So just from the jump, I want to say I'm not a therapist, not a doctor, not an expert on politics or anti-racism. I'm just a mother and a person who is feeling deeply affected by what's happening right now. And I'm also a community leader who is the recipient of a lot of people's thoughts and feelings and emotions, and people tell me stuff. And so I reflected back to the community with anonymous posts and messages so everyone can read it and also have the safety of anonymity while they're talking when I post things for them anonymously on our feed. So I just wanted to open up a place to talk about how we're feeling. And I also wanted to talk about some of what I'm feeling, and I didn't want to have to make like a polished Instagram video, and I figured I could just talk about it here, and if no one's watching, whatever, and then I could just save it to highlights. Some things I noticed today. I was talking to a friend, and we were talking about what it was like to watch the videos of the scenes unfolding yesterday at the Capitol. And let me see. Yes. Oh no. Okay. No. And when I opened my computer yesterday to watch things that were happening live, I was staring at it in disbelief. Not because I can't imagine how this could have happened. I mean, this is what we've been fearing the worst, and it makes kind of perfect sense that this happened. But it was it still felt really unreal. And then a friend of mine today said earlier to me, it felt like when 9/11 was happening and we were watching the planes crashing into the buildings, and that same sense of like, how could this be happening right now? Like, is what I am watching on the screen, like, is it a show? is this real life? Even though you know intellectually this is real life, it also isn't really processing as real life. And then I started to think about how, well, there are some similarities. This is terrorist. This is a terrorist act, although the media is kind of reluctant to use that word. Yesterday it was all about protesters, and I'll get into why that is problematic for me in a minute. But when we use the word terrorism at the same time, that kind of others us from the people who committed the act. And when I say us, I mean white people, because we also are part of the problem. And that's what I was saying earlier in my post today, about why I feel that as parents, as white parents especially, we need to be talking to our children about the events that are happening. And I know that many of us are feeling perplexed about, well, how do I even begin? How do I talk to my kids about this? Some people are afraid to share their personal beliefs with their children because they don't want their kids to repeat it on the playground, and then it gets repeated to other parents and they don't want to be judged. I think we have to make a difference now. I think we have to say how we feel, and we have to teach our kids now. And I started having these conversations with my kids earlier this summer, and it doesn't get easier. They still ask me very basic questions, and I just give them the same answers, hopefully a little bit better each time. But I wanted to find out also from you guys how you're approaching conversations with your families. And I think that should be front and center of our minds today and as we move forward with what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. And I thought this would be a good place to start, and I can do my best to tell you what I've been saying and how it's unfolded in my house. But I think that the questions are going to come up, and we need to be prepared to have some kinds of answers. They're not going to be right, but we have to have a conversation with our kids, because it's really scary for them too. Today I was listening to my 9-year-old talk with his classmates and his teacher on remote school, and the teacher opened up the discussion, their morning meeting, and she said, how is everybody today? Like, how are you guys doing? And the kids just kind of sat there staring blankly. I knew for a fact that my son Julian was not feeling great. He had a lot of questions, and even though I did my best to answer them, I think he wanted to talk about it. How do you approach your answers to the difficult questions? I'll tell you what I said last night to Julian, but I want to also talk about how the teacher answered their questions today. So he had some questions, but he didn't want to be the first to ask. And I encouraged him to say, well, why don't you tell her how you're feeling? He's like, I don't want to be the first. A bunch of kids said they were tired. Tired could mean a lot of things. Could also be like anxious. And finally, Julian said, well, what happened last night? What happened yesterday at the White House? And a bunch of other kids said, yeah, what the heck? And another kid said, yeah, like, what even happened there? So, it was bubbling under the surface. They're 9. You don't know how much they're absorbing from the news, whether their parents showed them what happened yesterday or not. But they're paying attention. And a lot of them had no idea how to process this, or had a lot of questions. And the teacher was very careful. She was trying to say, well, a lot of people believe one thing and a lot of people believe another thing. And she tried to explain the process of the electoral college in the side chat that was happening that the teacher can't see, because the kids have their own private chat. It was so interesting to see their questions, because the kids were asking each other, wait, I don't understand. Who are the good guys? Is the government good? Are the protesters good? And one of the kids was like, well, protests are okay if they're peaceful. And then another kid said, but they weren't. They were violent. They were really violent. And I was so happy that someone actually called it out, because the teacher didn't talk about this, and she didn't talk about race, and she didn't talk about the fact that these were racist white men storming the Capitol. And I guess, she felt that she couldn't go there, and that's where it's our job to come in to fill in those gaps in the questions that our children have. So someone had said, blinded by the light, you can always admit that you don't have the right answers, or use time to pause and be honest. Absolutely. I say to my kids all the time, I don't know the right answers. I don't have answers. I can just tell you what I've gathered in my time on this earth, and how I feel, and that these are my values, and I want to share them with you. This is my interpretation, and that I hope that when you've done your thinking and your evaluation of all of these events, you'll have your own ideas. At 9, they can process a little better than like a 3-year-old. And definitely at 6, they can process better than a 3-year-old. But there are different lessons that you can teach at every age. My 6-year-old yesterday was on YouTube, like at every moment he could get on YouTube in between his remote school. And I pulled him aside and I said, I'd like you to take a break for a second, and I want to talk to you. And I want to show you some videos of things that are happening at the White House. And he knows about the election. He knows that Biden won, and he has a fear of Trump. They actually talk about him on the playground like he's an evil man and a bad guy. And I think that's a whole other story. But we watched I was like, let's stop the videos of people unboxing toys or whatever, and like, let's watch this. And so he had his questions like, wait, what are they doing? Are they mad that Trump won? Like, those were some good questions from a 6-year-old. He probably wouldn't have asked that last year when he was 5. But it's something that we talk about every time that I have the opportunity, I try to bring up something, and he asks another question. It might be the repeated question from the last time we talked about politics, but every time you bring it up, you get to reinforce something else. And it's really important that you give them that opportunity. And you know what? I find that with children, like the young children, their attention is so fleeting, and that's okay. It doesn't mean they're not interested. It's just that you have like 3 minutes to get in there. You're not going to have like a heart-to-heart hour-long discussion. 3 minutes. Like, get in there with your 5 or 6 year old, say something, read them a little book, show them a clip, and then that's it. They go back to YouTube. But I promise you that they're going to ask you something about it a couple days later, and you'll be like, where did that come from? Because it percolates in their head. For my 9-year-old, we read some articles last night. He had his questions, and then at dinner, he started kind of like, he really got, I was stuck at one point because he asked me, so, when they start coming to our door, they, meaning the terrorists at the Capitol, when they start coming to us, when they come to our door, should we lie and tell them that we agree with what they believe so that we can protect ourselves? And I was like, babe, that's not going to happen. They're not coming to our door. But I can understand how he thought that. I mean, they broke into the White House. That doesn't happen. And he's like, well, I mean, like, what if they do, though? Should we lie and say that we believe what they believe? And I was like, but it's not going to come to that. And then inside I was like, but I don't know. Look what happened. Look what happened in Nazi Germany. Everyone said it's not going to come to that, and then people came for my great-grandmother. And that's exactly what he was thinking, because then the next he said, well, they came for Gigi. And my great-grandmother, she survived the Holocaust. And she survived by pretending that she wasn't a Jew. She survived by pretending that she was a deaf mute, and so that no one would hear her accent. And that is why she's alive today, in her 90s. And that's not something that my 9-year-old forgets. And then he asked, if you were alive then, Mom, would you have lied and pretended that you were not Jewish? And I didn't really have the answer there either. But what a crazy question. Would I lie and pretend that I am a racist to save my family? I want to say no. I didn't have an answer. I'm so grateful for everybody that's commenting right now. I'm just talking here, but I wanted you guys to talk. Let me just scroll up a little bit and see. Holding space for everyone today. This is insanity, and I'm so thankful that my daughter is only 3 months old and won't remember this. She'll probably read about it, though. Media literacy is an important topic, too. How does the media talk about this, and how can we teach our kids to think critically about different, quote, sources of information? Yes, yesterday there were words of protesters. That's how they were described, right? And so that's why it was so interesting, I think, the question today in the comment section, the chat, in my 9-year-old's class is like, who are the good guys? The protesters or the government? Because protesters are usually the good guys, right? Like a lot of the Brooklyn moms around here were protesting things, and we're good, right? We're the good people. These were not protesters. So the media has to stop calling them protesters. That's not what they were. These were white supremacists. These were, I don't know, I want to call them terrorists, but then when I call them terrorists, I feel like, well, they're white supremacists and they're also us, because we're part of the problem. I'd love to know what you think in terms of the semantics of this. What do we call them? I'm due in July with my first, and I'm so saddened by everything that's happening and has happened. Is this really the world I want my children to live in? A lot of people have been asking that. And this came up over the summer too. People who were contemplating having another child and saying, do I really want to bring my kid into this world? Is it fair to bring a child into this really fucked up world? And it's a valid question. I told a story over the summer. Again, I'm going to bring it back to great grandma, who also felt that way after she survived the war and had lost everybody in her family, every single person, including her brother, who was her best friend, and her father, which was the final blow when she learned of his death, because his words were what kept her really alive, kept her going throughout the war, because he told her, you, my child, will live to tell the story. That's what kept her going. When she learned of his death, she had a breakdown, and she declared to a friend, I'm never going to have children. I'm never going to bring them into a world that could produce so much hate, that has so much hate, and that has so much sadness. Why would I bring a child into this world? And the friend said something like, but who's going to be the change? Who's going to make the world a better place if not your children? And she changed the way that she thought about things. That children are going to be the people who change the future. And her children did go on to become the kinds of people that make the world a better place. And I mean, thank God, because I wouldn't have grandchildren. I wouldn't have children. She wouldn't have grandchildren, great-grandchildren. But I think that's something to think about when we get in a really dark place of like, why would I bring children into this world? Because they're going to be the change that we need to see in the future. Domestic terrorists is what they are. Thank you, Cuddle.co. I think we should call them rioters. I'm so sick of pretending at family gatherings that I didn't see my in-laws' post claiming this was Antifa and justifying breaking into the Capitol by saying, well, I guess some people are fed up. Yeah. Pretending at family gatherings. That I don't know how you do that. I don't pretend anymore. I just start getting really combative. Luckily, I don't have many family members who want to go to battle with me anymore. But I hear this so often here at Mom Group. It's just many of us are dealing with close friends and family members who still hold these views, and it's sickening to a lot of us that we have to still have these arguments even now. What do we say to those close to us who are choosing to put their hands over their ears and look the other way about this? It's infuriating to me that they don't acknowledge the insanity and privilege. I don't have the answer to that. What do we say to people what do you think? What do we say to people who are ignoring events that are happening very close to home, that affect us all, that threaten democracy, that are unpatriotic? that are about life and death. To those ignoring these events, I would say silence is compliance. We have to speak up. It's not enough to just teach our kids about being kind to one another. No. Our kids need the tools and confidence to have tough conversations and stand up for what is right. We need to not, be triggered. We need to not allow ourselves to be triggered by words like privilege. I agree. This is not about being kind. I was thinking again about the word terrorism and the conversation that the teacher had this morning with my kid and his friends, and how she was saying, well, this is about one side believing one thing and another side believing another thing, and we have to be open and we have to listen to both sides. And that reminded me a lot about the rhetoric we heard around the election. Like, people wrote to me at that time because I had a very strong opinion at that time, and I wrote about it here, and you heard it on Mom Group, and people said, well, some judgment-free space you have here, like, clearly you have a side. And I did. I really, really did. At the time, one could say, it was very much about, there were politics involved in terms of, there still was a Republican side and there still was a Democratic side. There's nothing Republican about these guys who wanted to, I heard today on NPR, they wanted to hang people from the gallows who disagreed with them. I am not going to sit patiently and listen to that side. And I remember on 9/11, there was not a soul who was like, yes, we should really sit and listen to the terrorists explain to us their side of why they felt that all Americans should die. Let's talk to them about that airplane and the people on it. Why they should lose their lives right now. I'd love to hear their thoughts. Like, no one said that. I mean, it was explored later, the minds of the terrorists, but it wasn't like, let's have a sit down, let's have some tea. Like, come on. This is not about sitting down and hearing each other out. And I hope that families that still, feel strongly about their political views with supporting the Republican side don't feel like these people represent them. I really hope. My son is 2.5. Using a lot of direct vocabulary, he understands that no matter what we call them, their intent was not positive. It was destructive, wrong, and unproductive. Yeah, I think a 2-year-old gets that. Smashing windows, hurting people, stealing their stuff. I think 2-year-olds get that. There's no benefit of the doubt owed to people who do what those people did yesterday. No. That was a crime. That was a criminal act. How are people feeling in their bodies? Did you sleep last night? Did you drink last night? Like, I was going to do sober January because, December was rough, and I was going to not drink at least for 2 weeks, at least. I wasn't going to have a giant goal. And I didn't drink on Monday night, and then on Tuesday I was feeling a little bit crappy, so I had just a small drink. And then last night I was like, I'm not gonna drink for the rest of the week. But then yesterday happened, and I was like, I can't, this is my coping mechanism. And I just don't see that happening for the next 13 days. What a terrible time for a no drinking decision. My whole body is in pain, and I'm just clenched. I'm wondering if any of you can relate and are maybe doing other more positive things to deal with the stress. My head hurts. I slept half of what I did the night prior. I have a headache today and I'm taking a personal day Monday. I'm tired. Feeling so heavy, tried to put together some actionable items to feel better, but for now, just allowing myself to feel angry and scared. One thing that would be great to do, I think that could be positive, would be to pay reparations. One of my favorite places to find ways to pay reparations to Black people is one of the pages that I always promote here, and I will send it to you guys later. I'll put a little swipe up later, and we can. And I have a couple pages that I'm going to give you after this, and I mentioned them in highlights a while back, but I'm going to give you a couple different options. And another thing, and then also Beck's Life also has some really great recommendations too of things that you can do today to feel productive and not just paralyzed and scared. I'm doing the most basic white girl thing of all time and baking banana bread. Yeah, it's a really white day. Really, I feel very white today, so, and not very, very sad about being white. This is a reflection of us. This is not them. Them meaning the guys who stormed the Capitol. This is still, we are part of the problem. This is white supremacy. And I know we were super gung-ho about fighting it this summer, but it's definitely died down. I've died down too. Like, it was all over my feed in June, and now it's kind of just drips and drabs, and we ignore it when it's useful to ignore it, and we talk about it when shit happens. And what do we do in between? Because there's something we could be doing every single day. There are people that could use uplifting, and there are communities that need our help, and there are people that we could be pushing harder to change legislation, and lots of things are fucked up. But it's easy when our lives are not bothered by these things. But yesterday our lives were threatened, right? Like yesterday our world felt really unsteady. That makes us angry. That makes mothers really freaked out. So now we want to do something. And why don't we want to do things in between? Because we're comfortable. I'd love to hear some other questions that your kids might have asked you. I know a lot of people have very, very young kids. Mine are a little older, being 6 and 9. But maybe some books that you've been reading to your kids about anti-racism, or just ways that you're trying to explain the current events. I know it's hard. Or where do you go to figure out how to distill the stuff that's happening in a way that your kids can understand it? I wish that they could talk about this in school. Maybe they do in private schools, but in public school they don't. Start within, communicate with your community, family, friends. Discomfort equals growth. I'm definitely uncomfortable, by the way. Like, as someone who feels very safe writing, because I can go back, I can edit, I can fact check. I can go back I can look at other Instagram accounts and be like, what are they saying? Like, is this okay? can check with friends and be like, do you think that, is this too much? Are people going to freak out? Writing is safe for me, and doing something like this is super uncomfortable because it's so public and I'm talking about something I'm not expert in. But I'm doing this because I want you guys to talk about it. I want you to get uncomfortable. I want other white moms to be talking with their kids. And to at least think about starting the conversation with their families, because I think that we can really make a difference. If we weren't uncomfortable, we'd be doing it wrong. It's vital to speak with people who don't share the same viewpoints too. We won't grow if we continue just to piggyback friends and families' point of view. It's so right. Hey, Julian, Jamie. Absolutely. Although it has been super hard to have these conversations with people whose viewpoints differ with us. It's really hard. I feel like it's the most binary conversation. It's the most binary practice that I've ever had in trying to share views. It's like we can't come to any kind of middle ground where like I can see that. There's just nothing where we coalesce. I think having young kids, I'm learning to have convos with my circle so that I will know how when my kids are a little older. Yeah, it helps to hear what other people are doing who have kids who are a little bit older, and then you can file that away and know like what you might say when they're when they're that age. All right, I'm gonna wind this down. Get off my soapbox. Anyone else has any last thoughts? That's why I like talking circles better, because then I can actually hear you. But I also think that this has its strengths too, because you can just type it in, and if it's a little scary, I think you can be quieter with a comment versus having to show your face, especially since it's live. All right, thank you so much for being here, listening. We can continue this. Oh man, sorry that you're popping in right now. I'm gonna put this in highlights so you can watch it. Feel free to DM me with anything that's going on with you today. I know it's rough. I'm not gonna change the subject just yet. I think we should stay here. I think we should hold space for this. And I'm going to share your thoughts, continue to share what you're thinking anonymously. So send us DMs and we'll repost them on this topic. Because I think your voices really need to be heard. I want other people to hear what you're thinking. It really helps the community when we share what we're going through with one another. And I think the most helpful thing would be to hear about the conversations that you're having with your kids and the tough questions that you're battling with yourself. And even just how you're holding this all today in your body, in your head. So thanks for coming to my first solo live. And I will see you in the DMs.